I feel really lucky to have an audience in the UK as well. So let me just start. I'm going to read a number of elegies. Sorry, but this is where I'm at. So the opening poem of the book. You can all, it's good, Colin, you can hear me? Okay. Speech acts for a dying world. A field sparrow is at my window tapping at its reflection, a tired antique god trying to communicate. It's getting to me as I set out to sing the nimbus of flora under a partly mottled sky. As I look at the end and sing, so what? Sing, live now, thinking, why not? I'm listening and receiving now, and it feeds me. I'm always hungry when the beautiful is too much to carry inside my winter, when my library is full of loss, full of wonder. As the polis is breaking and casts a shadow over all of me, thinking of it. When the shadows fall in ripples, when the medium I work in is deathless, and I'm living inside one great example of stubbornness as my head is stoved in by a glance. As the day's silver-tipped buds sway in union, waving to the corporate sky, when I said work and meant lyric. When I thought I was done with a poem as a vehicle to understand violence, I thought I was done with a high-toned, shitty world, done with a voice in its constituent pap. Called down the inherited phenomenal world when it's raining in the book, lost to the world in an abundance of world, like listening to a violin when the figure isn't native, but the emotion is. When everything is snow and what lies ahead is a mesmer's twirling locket. I thought I was done with the marvel of ephemeral shadow play, the great design, and all that. I thought I was done with time, its theatricality, glamour, and guff. Gusting cloud, I see you. I become you in my solitary thinging here in partial light. When I said voice, I meant the whole unholy grain of it. It felt like paradise. Meaning rises and sets. Now a hunter overhead, now a bear at the pole, and the sound of names, the parade of names. This is a street near where I live, Nonotuck Avenue. It's one of those many anglicized native peoples of the Americas, like the state I live in, Massachusetts, here in, quote, New England. That I saw the light on Nonotuck Avenue. That every musical note is a flame native in its own tongue. That between bread and ash there is fire, that the day swells and crests, that I found myself born into it with sirens and trucks going by out here in a poem. That there are other things that go into poems, like the pigeon, cobalt, dirty windows, sun, that I have seen skin in marble, eye in stone, that the information I carry is mostly bacterial, that I am a host, that the ghost of the text is unknown, that I live near an Air Force base and the sound in the sky is death. That sound, like old poetry, can kill us. That there are small things in the poem, paper clips, gauze, tater tots, and knives, that there can also be emptiness fanning out into breakfast rolls, macadam, stars, that I am hungry, that I seek knowledge of the ancient sycamore that also lives in the valley where I live, that I call to it, that there are airships overhead, that I live alone in my head out here in a poem near a magical tree, that I saw the light on Nonotuck Avenue and heard the cry of a dove recede into a rustle, that its cry was quiet light falling into a coffin, that it altered me, that today the river is a camera obscura bending trees, that I sing this of metallic shimmer, sing the sky, the song, all of it, and wonder if I am dying, would you come back for me? This next poem is a fugue, and I wrote it in '99 when I was in Marseille on a residency, and it's the last place Simone Weil occupied in France. At any rate, it's kind of like an elegy to the 20th century, but it kind of seems to work now. Beginning with a phrase from Simone Weil. There is no better time than the present when we have lost everything. It doesn't mean rain falling at a certain declension at a variable speed is without purpose or design. The present everything is lost in time. According to laws of physics, things shift when we lose sight of a present, when there is no more everything, no more presence and everything loved. In the expanding model, things slowly drift, and everything better than the present is lost in no time. A day mulches according to gravity, and the sow bug marches, gone. The hinge cracks, the gate swings a breeze contingent upon a grace opening to air, velocity tied to winging clay, every anything in its peculiar station. The sun brightens as it bleaches, fades the spectral value in everything seen. And chaos is no better model when we come adrift, when we have lost a presence, when there is no more everything, no more presence in everything loved, losing anything to the present. I heard a fly buzz. I heard revealed nature, cars in the street and the garbage footprints of a world, every fly a perpetual window, unalloyed life, gleam, pinnacles of tar. There is no better everything than loss when we have time, no lack in the present better than everything. In this expanding model, rain falls. According to laws of physics, things drift, and everything better than the present is gone in no time, a certain declension, a variable speed. Is there no better presence than loss, a grace opening to air, no better time than the present? Okay, so this next poem is called When Orbital Proximity Feels Creepy. Right now, there are teenage microwaves screaming through your body while you are having text with me. This is the moment I'll need you to sing with me. I'm making my way in some dark room looking for other structures to love. From the left, something speaking. I can't identify. The floor goes unfixed and moving, and this doesn't happen only at night, but during the day when I don't want to think on it. That I saw a blood orange ball caught out my window, that I'm listening to light, and it said time. I'm listening to time. It says, ha, you need to be howling at bloody torn space, need to be spooked out of your hidey hole and its glowing mess. But I love this ball I'm riding on, the strange hunk of metal and rock whizzing around my loves and my loving, the fact I spin and it spins, and everything is spinning close up. From far away, it's so cool. I guess they call this physics, or they call it laws. If they're so well made, why do we suffer? I thought the day was opening, but now I see it's already gone. Outside, the cruel dove has a broken window. The day isn't friendly. Who are you to me? A way to understand the floor that holds me up and leaves me standing. I don't know where to go. Me, Tuesday.
Looks good.
Sorry. The floor that holds me up and leaves me standing. I don't know where to go. Me, Tuesday at 5 p.m. What does it mean to be in a room, any room? The wind banging against the clapboard. I know enough to see the cracked pane isn't going to be fixed anytime soon. Who has time for such things in the song? breaking, blooming, the wobble of light on wood grain late in the day, in the loneliness of orange, in the loveliness of orange. So I'm going to read 3 poems from a long series called Field Recordings. And so I'll read read 3 of them. Languor. The old language is the old language, with its lance and greaves, broken shields and hammered vowels, a stairway ascending into a mirror. See it and climb the old helix beneath a scarred and chipped northerly sky, rotunda blue. Sing genetic cloud forms mirroring the syntax and reflection. And what would you have? Paving stones, rhetoric, the coping of bridges, leanings. What is taken from res? To reconstruct, to recognize the categories have failed, that the index was a liar. The lists have grown lonely far from home, houses of worship, roofs, toy stores and liquor stores, names, historical furniture, descriptions of architecture, patina in a fanfare city. I have eaten the air of that city. Rapper frag. The world today is slowcore, a rhythm section dragging. At the moment I drag and solo in a bitten landscape, torn vowels that sound out vowel or sadness like glitter sprinkled in a mind. A sun-slashed parking lot thinking a poem stalled in the broken surround. See the chubby kid dazed, his spilled bike, more debris, CVS in the distance. Remember me to convenience stores. I saw this too every life of my day, yet I ate. I had money and a car. Strangeness becomes you. The old language is the old language. It don't mean shit. It's not where you begin. It's how you finish. Everyone's got beer muscles when they're young. Try as you must, break as you will. Solo in space, clinging to space. Fuck, the air said, passing a corner, a long ropey snot hitting a gutter. To know something and fail. Why discount it? The onslaught of eyes beneath a fuck you sky. The syntax breaks down its mangled draft and says, one day the poor will have nothing to eat but the rich. I hate that when syntax connects me to the rich. Man, it's so quiet here. It's weird. All right. This one's called, this is one of the 2 title poems of my forthcoming book in the fall. Now it's dark. Not the easiest day I'm having, clouds banking, and I drop my signal. I was trying to find my shoes and thought, I am overpowered by the gigantism of commercial governing. As I looked for my shoes this morning, the thought was, where am I going? There isn't a place I can walk out from under this chemical sky. So I thought I would write a poem. I thought I would try and make art. But the chemicals seep into everything. Reader, if I could, I would bring back for you a sun made in crayon, a sun unformed in the paper sky. I wonder the paper that made me. Being human, I know that paper makes my mind. Strange pulp, reminding me I am far away. When my brother could no longer speak, I said, Tommy, I got this. Even if I don't want this, I'll sing for you. When my brother had no voice, there was only the couch and a wooden floor, the ceiling and the TV with nothing blaring. When my brother lost his voice, I lost my childhood, lost the sun over sand in some place I can't remember in Rhode Island summer. So far from myself in a body I can't remember. To no longer remember my body as a child, to no longer remember today all that was. Van Gogh was tormented by the sun, and why not? A constant blade-searing light that kills and cures. I am not comforted by the cold stability of universal laws, though one day I'll die and think, that's okay. At least I'm writing, and it makes a party in the dark, a zombie feature that connects me to the undying. I read every moment as an opportunity for grace and think every moment is a possibility of art. I tie my shoes and now I'm standing alone in some inky light. Yesterday I passed a budget motel next to the People's Bank. If there's some connection, it's lost on me, my heart lost on me. Weather like thought dissolves into static, a wiggy keepsake like nesting dolls of my spiritual blank, sky opening into blank. I thought grief is a form of grace. Then someone said, the thing about money is that it's money. I live on the edge of an expanding circumference alone in some inky light. Now rain turns the world to constant applause. The day is uncoupled. All there is thunder as the house decays into a sound like me. Freezing rain with silver seems to be speaking and isn't asking me anything, just doing its thing in the gray morning. I was down with materialism, but wanted mystery. I've asked myself a lot of questions like why the days cascade, swiping left for life, right for lost. All of it a dumb show, all of me invested in poetry and the arrogance of this, wanting to transpose loneliness. Why not take on the next life with its silence? On my desk, there are small plastic creatures. The light on them is unrealistic. It uncouples me. Or the sight of serious windows opening out onto serious lawns. This must be a government building. This must be the anodyne room of a hospital beeping. Every pronouncement on the feed, alien. I'm in this corridor, wandering a mind. But the day is past caring. The rhythmus is blooming at the beginning of the way back when. I am sick with tradition and its weak signaling. Sparkling eclogues drift and contribute little to the cause. I am an incident trapped in thick description. Just Google it. Dust jackets show some rubbing, near fine in cloth. The present is constant elegy. Those years when I was alive, I lived the era of the fast car. There were silhouettes in gold and royal blue, a half-light and tire marks across a field, times when the hollyhocks spoke. There were weeds and a hopescape as in a painted backdrop there is also a face. And then I found myself when the poem wanted me in pain writing this. The sky was always there, but useless, and what of the blue flocks on stage and morphing? Chance blossoms so quickly, it's a wonder we recognize anything, wanting one love to walk out of the ground. Passion comes from a difficult world. I'm sick of twilight when the light is crushed, time unravels its string. Along the way, I discovered a voice, a sun-stroked path choked with old light, a ray already blown. Look at the world, its veil. This one's titled Sentences in a Synapse Field, and it comes from a video work by a British artist named Rick Myers. And I wrote this for a project he was working on. Sentences in a synapse field. For I wanted sound to dig into sound, for snow and blood, for wine and mirrors, for electrons and electricity, for debris, for damaged art, our collective fortune, future. For as long as there have been soldiers, there have been poets. For as long as poets, there has been a bridge. For I wanted to hold a room in silence, for debris flooding back into a wave. For as long as particles, a charge, for it should be incredulity to be alive, for these things that can be told until mystery becomes elegy, for it was March going into April, for the day was speaking the day, for what you thought, for what you buried, for who you are. Now it's dark. No one gave me a greater thing than their time. But the old song, worn from use, is with me again. So much of it behind me now. In front of me, a slow season when a face passes into a name. Last night, the moon was lolling 9 degrees over the horizon, but I didn't know. I was in a fever dream, downloading ravens into my skull in unkindness of them. This is called what it's like to sleep alone for years. It means all these years to remain untouched, wrote the poem. I use my mouth to say goodbye, fever dream, raven, skull, to say like a flower, little dust, to say what of it. The world is close today. An elegy is my tonic. I recast language in hope of recovering the red oak my neighbors felled. It lived over 100 years, glowing. Now, neither music or rhyme, just night, tin, and sky. And I'll finish with this one. Yesterday was Mother's Day in America. I wrote this when my mother was dying, and then she was gone. The growing edge. There is a spike in the air, a distant thrum you call singing. And how many nights this giganto, torn, tuned, I wonder if you hear me. I mean, I talk to myself through you, hectoring air. You're out there tonight, and so am I. For as long as I remember, I talk to the air. What is it to be tough? Whatever do you mean? How mistaken can I be? How did I miss it, as I do entirely, and admit very well then, I know nothing of the world, can see it now, can really see. There is a spike, a distant thrum to the empty oak clock autumn litter. It's ominous, gratuitous, the asphalt quality, these feelings. It's Sunday in deep space, and in the breeze scatters, felt presences behind the hole in the day, sparks, ominous spike. I've not been here before. My voice is looking for a door, this offing light reaching into maw. What does it mean to enter that room the last time I remembered it, and ungathering every piece of open sky into it, the deep chill inventing, and is it comfort, the cold returning now, clear and crystalline cold, I standing, feet on the ground, I frozen, and I can feel it, to meet incumbent death, we carry within us a body, frozen ground. What does it mean to be tough or to write a poem? I mean the whole vortex of home buckling inside, a deep sea wine, flash lightning, birth storms, weather of pale, blinding life. Thank you.
Peter, that was such a beautiful reading, and there's people calling for more in the chat.
Yeah, right? How long did I read for? I don't know.
Well, you can read more if you, I'd love to hear more.
Really? Okay, I'll read. All right, I'll go. I'll read one more. How about that?
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, now I got to figure it out. Okay, this one's a little nuts. It's another new one. Every day I want to fly my kite. Give the world to the world, time to the flood. Give ash to gardens and grain to trees. I am not cowed by the superlative nature in trees. I am lifted and see petals opening. Give the freckled ground to sun. Give sepulchre to sky, to song. I am not one to disregard thrush, diminish sparrow. Give the arrow to lovers, night to lavender, lavender to sleep, to wing, to want, to wound, to wonder, the night's watch, the optical dawn. Give water to stone, stone to echo. In the mosaic, the dove's wings are made of bits and stone. The world is like this. If I saw it, I felt it. If I felt it, I learned from it. And when the moon opens the horizon, that's Tuesday gone. The moon, the silk, the corn, the rail. I felt this and it stuck to me one midnight. I was muling. I was alive with fancy and silk and stuff. I was stuffing for a chair, a doll. I was blinking and crying, and now the word falling, now other rains, now organic cyclones and seeds, the deadly swoon and strength and with color, and the sound of crows and their platinum sheen feeding the sky, flames and greatness towing the names. Give home to the horizon, horizon to mystery, mercy, meaning. I thought I might try to head out the door, it doesn't matter. I go as long as I go, and if you're there to sparrow, sparrow. There you go.
That was so wonderful.
So
Peter, that was just an absolutely astonishing reading. So incredible.
That's nice.
Thank you so much for it. I feel really privileged to have heard that. There is the opportunity, if people would like to stay around and ask some questions, you can post them in the chat, or you can just turn on your mics now and ask a question. I know Peter sort of has said that he'd be happy to answer some questions if there are some. So,
and you don't have to. Up to you.
There's certainly so many wonderful comments coming on in the chat. Thank you, Peter. Lovely to hear you again. Wow, thank you. Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Just so, yeah, the reading went over great.
That's nice. That's nice.
I'll let people.
So strange in my space station. I don't know how many, I don't know if people live with other people. I've just been trapped in my house for the last, coming into the 8th week here. It's very strange. So it's nice to see people. I'm just going to click through and see who's here because I've just been lost in my own thing. Wow, so many people I love. This is great. Thank you so much. It's really lovely.
So I mean, if we want to have more of a discussion, I can kickstart with a question, or yeah, whatever people think really.
Why don't you ask me like 2 questions? Let's see what happens.
Okay, that sounds good. So I'm really going to ask, you've sort of queued up this question in a way, mentioning around Elegy and also the Fugue poem, the beautiful, beautiful Fugue poem that you read. And so I just wanted to ask you maybe to say a little bit about the significance of Elegy for you as a form, and if there are elegies, you know, because it's such a various form, but then it also feels like sometimes it moves beyond just being a form as we understand form, but actually being a tone or an atmosphere as well. So I was just really asking you to expand a bit on Elegy.
I like that idea of a tone or an atmosphere. I think I can relate to that. To me, Elegy is a really fierce form. It's a form for me that becomes a tool to understand and disclose reality to me. I'm interested in the lyric of reality. So what do I mean by that? I'm interested in this kind of stereoscopic view that the elegy allows. And the majority of my work is elegiac. It just happens to be my soul. But it's that stereoscopic view of here and now and then and gone, or the here of soft matter, of tissue, of being alive, and versus the dark matter of being gone, and that the awareness that we're gone for much longer than we're here. So Elegy kind of, for me, gets to accommodate this notion of a periodicity of a life form, of my own, of others, and I say stereoscopic because there's a kind of blur that happens, and that blurring of here and now. Like if you've lost people, they're here and gone. You're gone and they're here. It's this weird kind of relationship. So I remember Robert Creeley once said to me in his 70s, he said, getting older is like living in a neighborhood where every month another house burns down. And I was like, huh. And now, of course, I get it, Bob. Thanks. But I'd like to think that, while that's true, in that absence, in that space, in that emptiness, a new light shines through, a new ray comes through. And that ray is altered, the light is altered by the absence and its loss. And it's that light that I'm interested in depicting in a poem. But the elegy is a flexible form. It's lyric, and you know, I'm interested in presence, mystery, intimacy in poems, and I think that that's what I'd like to do. You know, is that useful? Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. And that description of the kind of intimacy, that's completely what I think we all, even in Zoom, which doesn't feel like it's such a intimate media maybe, but listening to you reading there, and I'm sure there were people with headphones in, people, you know, with a phone in front of them, people with a computer in front of them, so all kind of different levels of intimacy. But what really rings through is the intimacy of the language and the address in your reading. This collection, Sky Burial, it features, it's like a sort of selected plus some new poems.
Yeah.
Were there things about putting it together, you know, whenever somebody puts together a collection, even if the works are familiar from reading for years or whatever like that, they start to seem afresh in relation to the other poems in a collection. So I just wanted to ask about some of that kind of curatorship of this new collection, whether it surprised you which poems you felt you wanted to include in it, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was an experience, a retrospective one. I was really happy to put in 30 pages of new poems, which will be in my new book in the fall here. But it took 4 years for this book to happen from the moment they said, Carcanet said they wanted to do it till it happened. And I'm actually glad it took that. I thought it was never going to happen, to be honest. But then it finally happened. And I'm glad that it did when it did, because I could make the book that much stronger. I could add archaeophonics, and then I could add new poems. So that's one thing that I like about this book. Having done one in America, In Defense of Nothing, which is before only went up to Threshold Songs, I like this book better because it's a little leaner and cleaner. There are poems in here that aren't in the American one, and there's poems that were in the American one I took out. And I guess I just figured, like, which poems do I want to read? I could flip to any page and I'd be okay reading it. But what I did curatorial is I began with the new poems, and then I went chronological from Periplum all the way through to Archaeophonics. And I took away all the section titles in between poems, and I tried to arrange them. I did some rearranging so that one poem from one collection blends into the next, and it kind of makes this continuous flow of poems. So yeah, the proximity of where poems are in relation to one another has something to do with the compositional integrity of the book for me. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter.
Right.
There's a question for Peter, which would you locate your work in a particular place or landscape, or places, landscapes?
Well, I've lived a bunch of places. I've been here in Western Massachusetts for 20 years now. I grew up an hour west of here, so maybe I'm just a provincial, but I like it here. I like its proximity to New York, etc. But, place is something that I find inside me. I think it's a spiritual thing, or if not a spiritual thing, it's an immanence. So if I locate myself, I guess it's strange enough to say that I locate myself in my library, because that's where I spend the majority of my time. That's what's furnished my interiority. Ray Armantrout has a poem where she says, our cat is made entirely of fish, but for me, I'm made entirely of poetry at this point in my life. It's what I have. It's given me a community, it's given me a context, it's given me a way to understand all sorts of things. So for me, place is very much my imagination and then the world that's out there. So there's the interior world and the exterior world, and where those two things cross, that chiasmus is where the poem exists for me. That's the reality. But for sure, I draw on the immediate surround, the sensory data of wherever I'm located. You know, like I was in Marseille for 4 months in 1999 without really any French, and the folks in Marseille had very little English. And that was interesting because I was without my language, without that context. And then I began to write in a way that I never had before. And that's that fugue beginning with a phrase from Simone Weil. But that the majority of that book, some values came out of having to reduce my signal and reduce the language. And it was a really great moment for me because it set me up to go where I've gone. You know, the dream for a poet, we talk about location, is a horizon. And so can a poet create an idea that's large enough that they can continue unpacking it for the rest of their life? Can they keep singing in that space for the rest of their life? Is the idea big enough? You know, and so that's my hope, that I found an idea or a concept that's large enough for me to continue to explore it. Didn't really answer the question about place, but yeah.
I think you did, Peter. And that idea of yeah, that's why that line about the kind of papery mind really resonated with me, from which you then included in your reading as well. There's a question in the chat from Maria Sledmere, and the question is, I love the presence of light in your work, both in terms of images, e.g. world of light, and from the spacing and so on. I wonder if this light invites certain modes of reading or affective and temporal orientations, like what is the time of light? Ephemera, contingency, speed, zoominess, or the infinite? What does it mean to read or write lightly in light?
Well, when I think of light, I always think of time. I think somehow light and time are somehow welded together. And what do I mean by that? It's like it takes 100,000 years for a photon to reach the surface of the sun, and it takes 8 minutes to hit our eyes. So it's 100,008 minutes long, and it's very old. And by the time it gets here, it's already blown. The ray is already blown. So to me, time, light is time. I see that as a metaphor, how they're connected in some way. Light is also something that's continually moving. It's a thing.
I'm watching. Yeah, I'm watching. I don't know how to ask, and I don't think I'll ask anything anyway. He sounds like a.
What was happening? Okay. At any rate, I think light is a useful metaphor for time, and it's also the thing that illuminates and gives relief to the physical world around us. I love this term. I have a poem. It's not in this book, but it's in Archaeophonics, called Civil Twilight, and I learned that civil twilight is the moment every day when the sun is 6 degrees over the horizon, and yet terrestrial objects can still be seen in their outline. But I love that it comes every day. I love that it's called civil twilight. But, you know, I'm interested in twilight. I'm interested in half light. I'm interested in that afterlife, you know, the human afterlife of recording light. Did my best there.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Peter. There's another question from, there's a few actually, from Sophie Collins. So in an interview, Peter said something about the synthesis of poetry and punk, and it would be interesting to hear a little more on this.
Huh. Well, yeah. That was my early life. What can I say? That was my generation. That was my moment. From about 77 to 87, I was pretty jacked into that scene. I moved to the Lower East Side in New York City so that I could participate in that moment. I saw every band so many times. It was exciting. I was alive, and the night was alive. I got lost in the night. I got really lost, and then I had to leave New York and change my habits and put my life together. But What do I like about punk? I like that it has a stance of sometimes indifference. It has a stance of critique. It has a stance of outrage. You know, outrage is really important, I think, in the culture that we live in, the political world we live in. You know, it's really horrible now, but it's been horrible for a long time. But at any rate, so yeah, that was the beginning of the Reagan moment, you know, which is kind of what has led us here with trickle down economics and every other thing that's wrong about commercial governing. So the punk was a stance against all of that. It was a way to liberate oneself. It was hard, but you know, I had this moment when I came from my favorite band in that era was called Per Ubu. They were from Cleveland. They're called the Avant Garage, and they came and they played at Irving Plaza and in the city. And then I walked down St. Mark Street, kind of, you know, high from this experience, you know, that great experience of being young and dancing, you know, at the edge of your extremes, and just their shows were always heathenish. It was great. And I was walking down St. Mark's when St. Mark's was a great street. And I passed the St. Mark's bookstore, the old one, when it was on the north side of the street. And in the window, in shocking pink, was this large book, and it said Blast across the cover. And looked like a Sex Pistols album, you know, and it was basically Wyndham Lewis, this great magazine from 1911 of the great English vortex. And I was very much interested in modernism. I mean, modernism is, at any rate, so I walked in, I was reading these things, and it, like punk and poetry had merged in this book, and it was like meant for me. And from that, I said, I want to edit a journal. And from that, I then began a journal a couple of years later when I was 26 called Oblique. And it had a very bright red cover with fluorescent green writing. So I guess I was, you know, mirroring it in some way. But yeah, I love the music of that period.
That's fantastic. And that's really wonderful to hear. That there's another question on the chat I just saw, which is about, scientific discourse, I think. So how does scientific theory and cosmology relate to and inform your work?
It's huge, it's big. Empirical data and taking in sensory data and taking in its features and its constituent parts is a big way in which I work and think. It came from early life. My father was a scientist, and when I was a boy, he was constantly taking me out and looking at things. Like we'd look at a tree and he'd say, "What do you see? Describe it. How do you think it feeds? How do you think the leaves work? Why are the colors this way?" And it would just, my whole life was taking things apart. When I was in my early life, one of the few subjects that I hated school, by the way, when in my early life. And one of the things that I truly loved was science, because the information seemed relevant, it seemed real, it was something, it was an application that I could use to begin to understand the world and its parts and its reality, its thingness. And so science has always entered my way of imagining the world, that deductive reasoning, and it's really a part of how I make poems. It's how I think of the fragment. You know, you put something together from these constituent parts and you create something new, hopefully something alive like a poem, and which is a sound. And as far as a cosmology, I would have to say that, you know, I grew up hardcore Catholic, but, you know, I left that space. But when you grow up as a child with a lot of religion, it leaves you a kind of wandering mystic, because they keep giving you this idea of God, and having a scientific imagination, you want to take it apart, figure it out. It's one of those ineffable questions you keep questioning. I'm not theistic, so I guess my closest definition to what that could be was the night sky. And the night sky for me is sacred. When I stand, you know, in a dark spot and I can actually see the Milky Band, I feel absolutely like I'm the right size. I'm tuned. I'm neither bigger or smaller than anything. I am just right where I'm supposed to be. I am the right size. And that my body and the things that animate me, the atoms, the material that makes me, the chemicals, all of it is everywhere above us all the time. We're made of the same material, and that's always blown my mind. And I find it kind of comforting, even though it's a mystery that's so much bigger than what I can comprehend. My first book is called Paraplume, and a paraplume is a way of navigating by the stars in a horizon. And so to me, that was a way to reckon in a poem, but also to understand that there is a verticality to sight. There is a verticality to the imagination. And maybe from my early days, my training, my verticality is I'm interested ultimately in the good, And going back to the scientific question, what is the thing that we take apart in a poem? What are we making? We're finally making, I think, I'm making my personhood. And I discover my personhood through the poem. And that's why I think it's a tool for reality, because I begin to understand the fiction of Peter Gizzi through the act of making poems. And, and like editing's really great when you take away a line and flip a line and move something, and I make the poem bigger than my intention, and then I read it back. I learned something, and what I learned is I just enlarged my notion of personhood. And yeah, I think poems do many things. And yeah.
That's a wonderful answer, and I love that notion of sort of, an expanded sense of personhood through poetry. It actually connects in a way to another question which has gone up on the chat. So that question is, Hockard points out that though everyone uses the word I, everyone means something unique by it. My eye is not your eye. Do you see your poems as addressing a problem in the manner or application of techniques within the first person address? How would you respond to your poem's question, what's a grammar when I is no longer I? How do your poems mean I?
Okay, well, the line is, what's a grammar when you is no longer you? But we can flip that. I think I and you work together. I think the I is the reader. It's me. But is it me? Again, it's me discovering some notion of myself, because I don't write autobiographically. I'd like to think, and what I do practice is I write autographically. I'm interested in autography, and that's not autobiography. It's not writing about my life. I'm writing my life. That's the journey, and that's what I mean by personhood. An autographical mind is the way you write your life. It's a discovery. So the I is me, but it's me in some moment of discovery, of some moment of dilation. But the I is also the reader, and the I and the you, these two things that call back to one another, in a weird way. And this is strange, and I can't really unpack it for you, but as I've gone on in my practice, and my practice has become one of really listening, I feel that I've placed the pronouns just on the other side of the river, and that my experience of writing is that I'm always posthumous in the act of writing. I'm coming from some other location, that going back to the Elegy question of somehow embracing this notion of being gone for so much longer than being here. And so I would like to think that I could make a speech act that calls back, that's still speaking back to me once I'm gone. And I know now I sound like Frankenstein, but I haven't quite figured it out. But I know that the voice for me now is placed not in me, but over there. Gina Barnes has a book, one of my favorite books of modernism. My favorite novel is called Nightwood. And she comes to see this doctor in the moment of his dress. He's wearing a wig and a gown, and he's rouged, and she's never seen the doctor this way. And she comes in, and she's slightly startled, but she says, he dresses to lie beside himself, who was so constructed that love for him could only be something special. And that's that notion of dressing just beside yourself, that the I is not really Peter Gizzi. The I is a constituent. It's made of a variety of things. It's also made by all the affiliated voices that speak through me in my poems. And that's my reading practice. So yeah, it's a puzzle.
Oh, Emma, thank you. Oh, what a wonderful answer. And yeah, it makes it makes me think a little bit of what I loved so much about Alice Notley's new book, For the Ride. That sense of what happens to poetry, sort of beside us or after us. But that's really wonderful. And thank you so much to everyone for these questions.
Yeah, it's really nice. Let me just finish with one small poem so we don't end
please.
up on my stumbling definitions of my practice. Let's just read this short one. And then thank you, everyone. Be safe. God bless you. Be strong. Now I can't find the poem. I will. Okay. Another weird poem, but I like it. Release the darkness to new lichen. But I found a way to say no to the wood in my house. It kept creaking, wouldn't stop talking. I found a way to say no. I need to be standing in the warmth of the wood that the sun made. I need to find myself dissolving, otherwise it is all, otherwise I'm lost. Did I say that? I saw the frill of light today, walking on the path. Could you hear the stirring in the wood, pine needles in the branches? Was it wind or a creature? Am I here or is it over? This was the first day, the nothing day in the nothing year. It gave me courage. It gave hints of blue, clouds, electrical and dancing. It gave me rays I've never seen, shooting down, touching things. This was the first day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was absolutely beautiful. A really, really wonderful reading. And there's so many people saying thank you on the chat.
How do I see the chat? What do I do?
If you click, there should be somewhere where it says more and chat, but otherwise I can also download it and send it to you. But
yeah, do that. Yeah.
I will do that.
I'm really bad at this stuff. Well, bless you all for coming. I feel really grateful. I feel like I'm not alone, and it's a really lovely experience. And I very much appreciate you taking the time to listen. And thank you so much, Colin, for putting this together since we missed our engagement. I'd prefer to be in Glasgow right now. And happy birthday to Peter Manson, a wonderful poet who's also a Glaswegian. Yeah.
Indeed. Just before we go, I just want to make a couple of announcements, which is, if you're interested, anyone, we have on Wednesday at 5 p.m. UK time, the amazing writer Jamaica Kincaid, who's going to be doing a reading and a conversation with myself and Sophie Collins. And we also have upcoming readings with Bill Bissett and Nikki Walshriger as well. So the best way of finding out about those would be to keep an eye, if you're on Twitter, on @U of G Writing, U of G Writing, or you can always email me as well, which is colinjherd@gmail.com. But just thank you again to everyone for joining. It was so lovely to see so many people turn out for such a special reading.
Thanks again. God bless.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Sad to go. Bye.